Good evening and welcome, everybody. This is the Doug and Fer Show. My name is Doug Petrozelli. This is my partner in truth.
Fernando?
And today we just have a couple of exciting things to discuss before we jump into today's topic. We are doing really, really well. We officially have 3,000 followers on Instagram and 4,000 on Facebook. The last four videos that we broadcasted on Instagram alone were over 500 views each. So we want to thank each and every one of you. We're really, really humbled and really, really blessed to see how many people are, the traction the show is getting. And, it's moving along slowly but surely, but we are excited about it.
Yeah, so thank you everyone to thank you to everyone who like logs in consistently and watches and I didn't think we had that many interesting things to say, but apparently you guys like it, so we'll keep putting out content.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So anyway, real quick topic today is primary election day. Before we get into today's actual topic, I just wanted to touch base and say that today was primary voting for um, uh, at least on the Republican side, but I believe for Democrats as well, to vote who is going to be our congressional leaders, our the governors, and for Senate. So who is going to be leading the parties come November for the general election? So that's a little exciting thing today. So today we'll after today, after those ballots are all finished being counted, we're going to know who is going to be on the ballot for us as Republicans and for Democrats, who is going to be the leader in November. So that's just a little quick, little exciting thing that was happening today, and I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Today's topic, or actually the format of today's episode is going to be a bit different. Instead of us like picking a topic and just talking about it, we actually Doug and I are just going to talk back and forth with each other. Um, when we were trying to discuss today's topic, we're like, what should we talk about? And then Doug told me, he's like, oh, well, what if we talk about this? And I was like, oh, well, I'm not sure I agree with that actually. And then I started talking to him, and then we noticed that we were talking. We're like, wait, this is good content. Let's just go live with this. So,
Absolutely.
so today we're just going to talk to each other. Um, so why don't we you kind of just get started and you tell me what you told me on the phone earlier?
Right, right. So this was the idea of wealth. And I think that a lot of people have a misconception of what wealth is. I think a lot of people here in the United States think that they are poor. And I think that we're really not. I would say most people in the Western world, when we look at, global standards, for sure, the Western world is much, much richer. But if we also look at from a standard of historical standards, we are far, far richer than we look at the past. And one of the arguments I think me and you were talking about was that I was saying, bringing up that a monarch 500 years ago, so a king 500 years ago, was not living as good of a life as I would say somebody that is, let's say, making $20,000, $30,000 a year in the United States today. I think the person that is making $20,000, $30,000 in the United States today is living a better quality of life. I believe they are richer, more prosperous, and they have access to more things than a monarch would have 500 years ago. I think um, there are certain levels of power that obviously a monarch would have had, but when we're talking about actual wealth, I think that wealth and comforts and luxuries in this world, I think somebody today that we would a lot of people would consider poor. I know that's not quite the poverty line in the United States. I believe it's about 17,000 a year is a poverty line, but even somebody in that state would probably be doing a lot better than a monarch would have been 500 years ago. That was my perspective, and I think you had something a little bit different to say about that.
Well, I agree with that. It was just when I think when you talked, it was just you used a different word. You used wealth. You said somebody today who makes $20,000 is wealthier than a monarch 500 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
when you used the word wealth, that's where I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. And that's because of the way you defined wealth. You were saying that
Mm-hmm.
wealth is um, like your standard of living as opposed to how much you actually have. So I said I was like, no, I don't think that's true. Like somebody making $20,000 today is not wealthier than a monarch 500 years ago. They just have access to different things, and that's because obviously science and technology advances. So a
Right.
monarch 500 years ago couldn't fly across the Atlantic, and they didn't have air conditioning and they didn't have a cell phone and things like that. But that's not because they weren't that wealthy. If they were living in today's time or if they had access to that, they would have been able to easily purchase it. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
they were truly wealthier, and if anything, the wealth gap was larger than it is today.
Oh,
Today
of
there's a
course.
smaller wealth gap, but anyway, yeah, I think that they were wealthier. Is just in terms of the things that they had comparatively speaking to someone today. Um,
Hmm.
so then you had something to.
Right, right. So what I'm saying, how do we define wealth? So let's just give an example. Let's say I had the ability to give you $1 billion, but you had to quit your job and you had to go live on a deserted island. Would it be worth it? The reality is, yes, you would have more wealth as far as money, but you wouldn't be able to do anything with that money. If I, and not just living on a deserted island, but you would be cut off from the rest of the world. So yes, you would have $1 million, or if I could give you 100 million golden bricks, and I could put you on that deserted island, and yes, you would have that, and you would have more wealth than you have now. But would it really be worth it? Because the idea of actual wealth is, as far as I'm concerned, is access to goods and services and being able to attain those goods and services. I think that a lot of times we can get in the concept that we think we have a lack because we're more concerned about what people have that we don't have. And I think that, one of the ideas that, for me, and the idea of this show is to prove the idea that we have so much more and that we could be so grateful for just having, just sheer access to medical care, things like aspirin, things like I know penicillin's a word, but penicillin, let's just say penicillin, people died from things 500 years ago that it was simple penicillin shot, cured and was done and over with. You didn't even have to think about it anymore. But 500 years ago, you had something that today would be cured with penicillin. You died a slow and painful death, no matter how rich, no matter how wealthy you are. And my argument is that the advancements, and I've heard this, pushback of, somebody saying that, hey, oh, that's just a degree of technology and advancement. But my argument is that we are wealthier today as people, particularly in the United States, also in the Western world. I would even say globally, because globally, even people have access to more things today. Even the poorest of the poor have a lot of access to things that even 30, 40 years ago, the poorest of the poor didn't have access to. Um, Wealth is what produced all that. And wealth is the whole means to it. Building a company, you can't do it without wealth. And yes, universities, that a lot of innovation comes from today. Well, we didn't have as many innovations, let's just say 50, 60 years ago as we do today. Well, because we didn't have access to, universities that took wealth. It took money to build buildings. It took wealth and money to pay teachers to teach people. It took wealth and energy and resources to create the environment where innovation happens. So when I say that today we are far more wealthier than we ever were, even the poorest are, it's because I think they have access to a better quality of life. Not necessarily power. Obviously, kings, mandated armies and they could set things on fire. They could command people to do X, Y, or Z, but they couldn't fly across the ocean. If they got, an STD like syphilis, they were going to die slow and painfully. Today that would be one shot of penicillin, and that's just an example off the top of my head. There's many, many sicknesses and illnesses that are cured very simply, but all of that were cured with wealth.
So you said two things here which were good. Um, Well, first you split your argument into two parts. You said one that we're wealthier, but then you also said that the things that we have, like science and technology, were produced by wealth. That
Mm-hmm.
second part is saying that science and technology were produced by wealth doesn't actually address the first argument. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
an extra thing that's added there, which is true. Um, but I agree with you. I just wouldn't call it wealth. So you seem like you're saying that wealth is um, like having access to
Goods and services.
yeah, that I don't know that that's wealth. I think, well, if I look up wealth, I mean in Google it says an abundance of valuable possessions or money.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, the state of being rich, material prosperity, plentiful supplies, or of a particular resource. So it talks about like just having a lot, um,
Right.
not necessarily like having access to it or having access to a better quality of good or service or something like that. That's not what wealth is. So if you were talking about um, a rich person that you put on an island and gave them like $1 billion, but they're cut off from the rest of the world, they wouldn't be as wealthy as a person who made $20,000. Right? I
Living
would
in the
disagree.
United States.
Yeah, I would disagree. I say that they're wealthier. but they just can't do anything with that wealth. So
Mm,
I think our we agree on the same thing. We're just have a different definition for the word wealth. So I agree with your concept. I just wouldn't call it wealth. It's some other word. I don't know what word to use for it. I don't know
mm.
if somebody that's listening
Well,
in live, what word would you use for that? Um,
right. Well, I would use wealth. I know that maybe we disagree, and if my whole thing is like, yes, that person had more wealth, but when you look back at the definition of it, it's not necessarily money as much as it is that they had access. Well, you said that they had a lot of things. And when I say access to a lot of things is, the idea today that if I want to go get a cheeseburger right now, I can go and get that right away because I live in a society that is very wealthy, that it's very, it's not impossible for me to go
yeah,
to
but
a restaurant.
that's not wealth though.
Well, what is that then? And why? What
Great
separates
question.
us from a let's say let's look at a let's look at a country like Zimbabwe that does not have as much wealth. They don't. It's not that I couldn't even take my money there and go and live somewhere with the money and wealth that I have here and go and do that because the whole area is not wealthy. Like there's not a McDonald's there. There's not a restaurant there that I would have the access as simply as I have it here. I'm not saying there's nothing there. I just would not have the simple
Well,
access as I have it now.
you need wealth to produce the things that give you those things,
Right,
like to
right,
produce to innovate penicillin, to innovate flight, to have a
right,
McDonald's on every corner. You need wealth, which gets to the second part of your argument.
right.
You need wealth to produce those things, but
Absolutely.
but having access to it doesn't mean that you're wealthier than someone who doesn't have access to it. It just means that you're able to access it. I don't know what the right word for that is. Someone who
Mm,
has more money than you but can't access that is still wealthier than you. It just means nothing. At least that's how I'm
mm.
defining the word wealth.
Yeah. Well,
Or
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think this is just a good conversation to have, so that we can come with those other ideas. Like, I mean, I guess maybe you could say quality of life. And I think that might be a thing because I would be much more concerned with if we would use the word quality of life as opposed to wealth. I'm much more interested in individuals' quality of life than them being wealthier. I'm much more
exactly.
interested in them having roofs over their head, running water, electricity, and this is for all humanity. I'm not necessarily saying that I would want everybody to be rich because if we just showered Zimbabwe with $100 million on every household, well, that wouldn't really do too much for them in that moment. And it wouldn't really do too much, if those individuals didn't know how to invest the money to make the quality of life great, which, in turn is what happens in a lot of third world countries. They're very corrupt. They don't invest the money well. And they don't ever really get ahead because a lot of Western nations do give aid to countries like that, and they don't move ahead because they don't invest it well. So I think that maybe the what we're looking for, the word is the quality of life. Would you say that is an actual term that you would agree that we have a far greater quality of life,
Oh,
here in
for
the United States?
sure. And I agree
Oh,
with every I agree with everything you said conceptually. It was just I was getting hung up on the word usage. But
right.
everything you said I agreed with conceptually. And in fact, it's great that we're getting some responses here. Troy Gale, Troy H.
Uh-huh.
Gale says wealth is a form of, this is a person on our Instagram, by the way,
Okay.
Instagram Live. Wealth is a form of power and freedom in our society. It's associated with money, but wealth is just access to those things. Maybe just keep it simple and say access. Thanks for writing, Troy. And
Thank you. Thank
we're going to try to have a way that we can have callers call in the future. I think we've we've tried that before when we do remote. When we're in the studio together, we can definitely put the phone number up and people can call and we can talk live like this. But thanks for reaching out and putting out your viewpoint.
you. Mhm.
Um, so
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
definitely agree with you, and I think that the heart of what you're saying is that we need to be grateful for the fact that we've innovated and come so far as a society, because we have much more now. We have a better quality of life and a better standard of living now than even the
Mhm.
richest person had 500 years ago. That's what you were trying to
Right.
say, and that's
Right.
something I agree with.
Right. Okay, so I think that that's the wording because I know I've had this back and forth, and I knew that was going to come out in this podcast because for anybody who doesn't know and understand, the we learn even as we have these live podcasts. Yes, we talk, we research, we read books, we do all these things, we do that. But one of the things is that, at least for me, I don't know, I want to directly speak for Fernando, but I learned so much when we have a show, when we do these things, when somebody writes in, when we have some guests on the show. We learn so much there that you wouldn't expect, because you think, oh yeah, we're prepared and we know everything that we're going to say. That's not necessarily true. And,
That's
and and
not
that
true.
was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show, because that was just going to help me learn on how to discuss this argument better and better. But I would say, when we talk about this, so like, here's an idea. Here's a beautiful idea. When I forget what the actual term is. A, a scarcity. I forget what the actual term is, but it's basically saying that we live in a post scarcity world. And the idea is that if we keep going in the direction that we're going to be in a post scarcity world. That doesn't mean there's going to be scarcity for nothing, but it means that basic human needs are going to be fulfilled, where healthcare, running water, food, electricity, and shelter, that is going to be available for all humanity. And that's something that I want to see. And there's a prediction that that will be somewhere between 2050 and 2070, if the world continues to progress the way it's going. And that is an idea that I think is going to be great for humanity, to see, every individual be able to have a shelter, a home that has air conditioning in it, that has running water, that has electricity, that has the ability to get food and provide 3 meals a day for themselves. That's a world I want to live in. And yes, there's much more than that. I think that we can also move ahead in that in humanity, but I think that's a good baseline for us to get to. One of the
Hmm.
things is, how do we get there? How did we get there in the United States? And my argument is, we can't do it without money. If we wreck the economy, that's not going to happen, because human beings need to be motivated by money to go and do things like that. And that's just a reality of the human condition. And so that's, why have we advanced so far here in the United States, is because we've had a driving force of money. We've had the ideas of free market. Economics has been the foundation for all innovation. Without economics, we would not be innovative.
It's true.
Without economics, we wouldn't be educated. Without economics, it's been the foundation for military. Even without economics, you cannot fight a military. You cannot push and drive people without good benefits, and to attract people to want to fight your wars, rather than demand them because they're citizens. And that makes it actually for a much better soldier, and it actually makes people that are educated and have doctorate degrees want to be a part of the military. These are things that are all based on wealth.
Yes, I wouldn't say that it's human greed. I mean, humans are greedy by nature. But
Mm.
even a non-greedy human, you can think of a person that's not in it for themselves. At the end of the day, there's, why have a job? Because they need to make money, even if it's not for themselves, even if it's to support their families or whatever it is. Even if it's not to an abundance, it's just a bare minimum that they need to get by. They still need something, and money is what gets them those things. So
Right.
the jobs that they do are motivated by the paycheck that they get, and the better the paycheck, the more motivated they're going to be to do the job. I think
Right.
to a certain degree, there are studies that are done on this, by the way. Um, because, like, there are people that are paid more but are less motivated to do a particular job, so it's a combination of things. But yeah, definitely at the end of the day, um, a free market drives itself to innovation, and innovation is what allows people, even the poorest people today, to have a better quality of life and a higher standard of living than the most important monarch 500 years ago.
Right. Absolutely. I
So,
mean, look at today. The fact that I don't need a servant to go to a store and pick up my groceries, or go get me, X, Y, or Z, or even clothes deliver. I literally have Amazon from my phone. Bam, it's there. Innovation made that happen. I can
mhm,
be a poorer person that, even 50, 60 years ago, I have a better quality of life than a lot of millionaires did, because they didn't have even a millionaire, just a bare level millionaire 50, 60 years ago, didn't have the means to just send people out and go do that. I get to do that today. This broadcast that we're having, this was something that 50, 60 years ago, it was only the people in the highest, statures that were able to have a broadcast through radio. Now
mhm,
everybody can do it. That
mhm.
is only by innovation, but that innovation wouldn't have been made possible without the wealth to build a school, to have people have the freedom to innovate and build things and make it more convenient for us. That is something that I believe is why we would say we're a wealthier society. I mean, we could maybe to use a term if we're a higher quality of life society, but even
No,
that, how
no,
that
you
built?
can't wealthier because wealth is what produced it. So
Right,
I think now we just have to see like what produces wealth, and that's the next question. And I think that's going to be
right,
for a future podcast. Why was the United States so wealthy economically compared to the rest of the world?
right,
Why is a Western civilization? Why are Western civilizations typically wealthier? Um, and we can talk about what causes that, like the
right,
types of market, the types of government, and
right,
things like that. So,
right,
uh,
right, right. So I think this was really, really great.
yeah, same. Good talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. But we are going to do another show, more than likely, not more than likely, we are going to do another show talking about what builds wealth, what made that wealth possible. So I hope that you would sign on. If you disagree with us or you have even something that you don't like about this, please write to us. Let us know. We want to have the discussion. We want to have that back and forth. We'd like to have you on the show. If you can't show up to our actual studio, we could more than likely have you remotely, which would be it's easier for all of us. We can do that today. So we just want to thank everybody who has signed on. Thank you everybody else who is helping this grow. Well, please like and share our content. Follow us on our various platforms, not just here on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We are also on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We are on Instagram right now. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So please follow us. Also, download our episode on our website. Our website is the link is in our bio of our Instagram page, also in our bio on our Facebook page. So please go to our website and you can download and just have easier access to listening to the show. So I think that wraps it up for today, right, Fer?
Yep. Thanks
All
for
right.
watching.
Thank you so much.
All
This
right.
is us signing off.
Signing off.